Hello YouTube and welcome to Musicology for the People. Ask anyone you know what classical composers they've heard of. The answers you get will probably be something like Bach, Mozart, or Beethoven. Now ask any of them what pieces they know by Beethoven and you'll probably get this answer. Ba-ba-ba-ba! Ba-ba-ba-ba! Or in other words, the opening strains of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. You might also get answered the vocal part of the fourth movement of his Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, but let's just focus on the Fifth Symphony for today, shall we? In the beginning. Good old Ludwig began working on this symphony in 1804, but the original sketches he had for it weren't very good and they were pretty boring, so he kind of put the project on the back burner and worked on a few other things instead. Some of the other things he churned out during this time were his opera Fidelio, the Mass in C, the violin concerto, and a few string quartets. He finally premiered the Fifth Symphony in 1808, 4 good years later, but he was very happy with himself for finally finishing it. But the premiere didn't go so well. He decided to premiere this symphony on an over 4-hour-long concert of all new works by him. Some of the things he premiered on this concert were his Sixth Symphony, so yes, he premiered 2 symphonies in one night, along with his Fourth Piano Concerto, Choral Fantasy, and a lot of other music. Funny enough, the Fifth Symphony was performed after the Sixth Symphony in order of the program. The Sixth Symphony was in the first half and the Fifth Symphony started the second half. By this time, all the audience members were very overwhelmed with the new music being thrown at them and were also freezing because the performance space that the concert was being given in was really cold and had bad heating. To make matters worse, the performers only got 1 rehearsal before this concert. Imagine never having heard the Fifth Symphony before and then being asked to play it after 1 rehearsal. It's a pretty hard piece. Obviously, it couldn't have been the best performance. It wasn't until about 1.5 years later when Beethoven finally published the score for the Fifth Symphony that people started to rave about it. The most famous early review was by E.T.A. Hoffmann, who was obsessed with this symphony. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's probably because he wrote the story for the Nutcracker. Anyway, soon after, the Fifth Symphony became an integral part of the orchestral repertoire, and it began to be played all over the world. Conductors then, and even today, pride themselves on having their own unique takes on the Fifth Symphony. Actually, it's more about the way they play just the opening theme, which is 8 notes long. But there are a lot of possibilities for how you can play it. Will you play the fast notes super fast? Will you give them rubato? Or will you put a big pause between the first and second phrase? I'm serious. It's very serious. Some of the conductors who pride themselves on their interpretations of the Beethoven 5 opening were Arturo Toscanini, Claudio Abbado, Erich Leinsdorf, and even Otto Klemperer. In fact, Benjamin Zander, conductor of the Boston Philharmonic, and also very well known for his public speaking, gave a TED Talk solely about how Beethoven wanted his Fifth Symphony to be performed. You gotta love Zander. In all seriousness, those opening notes are incredibly important. They've played major roles in a variety of hemispheres. One of the biggest roles it played was during World War II. Those opening notes sounded as the war cry for the Allied forces. Yes, you heard me right. It was for the Allied forces. But wait, you may ask, wasn't Beethoven a German composer? Why would the Allies choose a German composer's music for their war cry? You raise a good point. The first reason is Morse code. We all know that iconic image of Winston Churchill raising his fingers up into a V for victory. Well, funny story. Short, 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 long is actually V in Morse code. So, ba-ba-ba-ba is V for victory. The second reason is that Beethoven was actually very firmly against dictators and a strong proponent of personal liberty and freedom. In 1804, the same year he began to write the Fifth Symphony, Napoleon declared himself Emperor of the French. And at that time, Beethoven renounced any former support he had given the short, feisty little emperor. Actually, Beethoven had originally dedicated his Third Symphony to Napoleon, but when he found out what trend Napoleon was really heading on, He was so furious that he'd been taken in by this guy that he scratched off the name of Napoleon from the manuscript so hard that it actually ripped the paper. The third reason that the Fifth Symphony is very important to the Allied powers is that French resistance author and artist Maurice Van Maupez wrote lyrics to the opening of the Fifth Symphony. He named it La Chanson de Cinq, or the Song of Five, and he even used the V instead of the actual number 5. It was played many times on Allied radio stations between its inception in 1941 during the height of the Blitz on London and the end of the war. It was most famously played on June 1st, 1944, when the Allies were telling France that they should expect D-Day to happen anytime. And then, about 30 years after the war ended, in 1972-1973, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was chosen to be a part of the Golden Record. If you haven't heard of the Golden Record, it's a series of records that were sent up with the Voyager spacecrafts. These records contain images, sounds, welcomes in a variety of different languages, and music from Earth to convey to intelligent extraterrestrial beings the culture and peoples of Earth. 2 pieces by Beethoven were chosen to be included in this record: the Cavatina from the String Quartet No. 13 in B-flat, and the first movement of his Fifth Symphony. Otto Klemperer's recording was chosen for this Golden Record, and I'm sure he was very happy that his interpretation of the opening motif was chosen to be sent out to all those aliens. But then again, Chuck Berry was also included on this Golden Record, so maybe it's not saying much. Anyway, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is a very important work in classical music, it's important to the history of Western civilization, and it's potentially important to the future of all of Earth's people. Who knows, maybe someday aliens will pop down onto Earth and be like, hey, can we get some more of Beethoven's music, please? Okay, thanks, bye. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Also, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter where I post other fun stuff. And until next week, guys, ba-ba-ba-ba! Musicology.